Hello there, Commonwealth from Ocarina of Time's cut Temple of Light dungeon remains one of the game's biggest mysteries. Luckily, Nintendo themselves could answer if the rumored remake of The Legend of Zelda Ocarina of Time turns out to be true, as it could restore cut content, including the Light Temple dungeon. So let's explore this temple and its potential to finally be realized together. But first, leave a like, subscribe and press the notification bell, and let's get into it. The main objective in Ocarina of Time, once you become Adult Link, is to gather the 6 Sage Medallions to enter Ganon's castle. Getting these would naturally require entering 6 dungeons and beating their respective bosses at the end. However, when Adult Link wakes up in the Temple of Light after his 7-year slumber, he doesn't just wield the Master Sword and has the Hylian Shield if he didn't acquire it as a child, but the Light Sage Rauru also hands him the Light Medallion, and that's straight away. No trial, nothing. Leaving only 5 left to acquire, all of them requiring to conquer dungeons and bosses. And in this sense, it's rather jarring looking back at this moment, but it all makes sense when you realize that a dungeon was supposed to accompany the Light Medallion. It is just that Nintendo had to cut it due to a lack of development time and the system limitations of the Nintendo 64.
While there are many details about Ocarina of Time's other cut materials, there isn't much known about the Temple of Light dungeon, but a YouTuber named Wilfred Cthulhu discovered from the GigaLeak files a couple of color-coordinated keys that represent the different dungeons, one of which must resemble the Light Temple. There is also a light section in Ganon's castle that likely includes some material from the cut dungeon, even if it isn't all that exciting. Still, it requires the use of the golden gauntlet acquired in the Shadow section, which was originally supposed to be after the Spirit Temple. That's right, the Temple of Light wasn't supposed to be the first dungeon Adult Link enters, even though he acquires the Light Medallion first in the final game. Instead, it was supposed to be the last dungeon he completes before heading off to Ganon's castle for the final battle, perhaps after Princess Zelda got kidnapped. Here we would have likely had to combine all of the gear we've acquired throughout the game, resulting in a versatile dungeon to put all our weapons and skills to the test. Upon completing it, we would have not only acquired the Light Medallion, but also light arrows, which in the final game were just given to us by Zelda.
While the Temple of Light never saw the light of day, it's possible that elements of it were carried over into future games. One clear example still on the Nintendo 64 was the Stone Tower Temple in Majora's Mask, especially its implementation of light arrows. And although Ocarina of Time is by all means a masterpiece and by many considered the best Zelda game of all time, we can't help but feel that this one thing could really add to the game if brought back in a final version of the game. And this is what a 4K Ocarina remake could do. Reimagine, or after almost 30 years, realize the lost potential of this dungeon and make this classic game fully complete. It would also be a lot better than the Temple of Time from Twilight Princess. Don't get me wrong, it had an awesome mini-boss in the form of a Darknut, but other than that, it was one of the weaker dungeons in a game filled with very strong dungeons. We'll talk about the Temple of Light's gameplay shortly. But what could be far more interesting is its story and lore implications. And it ties that the ancient Sage of Light is, well, Rauru, the same name as the quote-unquote first king of Hyrule introduced in Tears of the Kingdom, and far more prominent as he is playable in Hyrule Warriors Age of Imprisonment. Both are enlightened leaders who command the power of light. One as the Sage of Light, and the other one as king and wielder of the Secret Stone of Light. Perhaps with all this in mind, an Ocarina remake could see some story elements sprinkled within the Temple of Light that connects the dots to this mystery.
The fact that these two people share the same name can't be a coincidence, as every character in the Zelda timeline that shares a name serves the same purpose, such as Link and Zelda, obviously. Then there's Impa, who acts as not only a guardian of the princess, but also a guiding figure for Link, no matter if she's young and strong or old and wise. A lot more is known about King Rauru in the Wild era than Sage Rauru, as the latter is mainly used as a tool for exposition and guidance. That could change in the remake, especially if the Temple of Light takes the form of a dungeon. He might be able to share more about his family history and how he's connected to King Rauru, assuming there is a connection at all beyond just a name. The restored Temple of Light dungeon could not only expand upon Rauru, but also Hyrule's history as a whole, as it pertains to the Zelda timeline. It could contain walls inscribed with stories of Hyrule's foundation, much like the wall writings in Zora's Domain from Breath of the Wild that directly reference Princess Ruto in Ocarina of Time. Some might think this would be too far-fetched, but the Shadow Temple is already an amalgamation of Hyrule's horrendous past and gruesome battles. The Light Temple could be the opposite, for better and for worse, boasting of Hyrule's achievements no matter how many bodies it buried to get there.
It's easy to forget that Zelda dungeons aren't just there to serve the gameplay, but the story and lore as well. With that in mind, there might have been lore elements from the Light Temple that were cut and never seen again in later entries. Even if the remake wouldn't include lore from the newest Zelda games, it could still somehow connect to them, or at least add other cut content from the original game from 1998. Whether that kind of lore returns in-game or in something like the Zelda Notes app, providing more backstory as it pertains to the world of Ocarina, just like we have seen in the case of Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom. But we're getting sidetracked here, as our main focus is on the Temple of Light and how a remake could bring it back to life. So think of the quality of the Spirit Temple and then some. Yes, it could also have been the first temple of the adult section before the Forest Temple. But to be fair, I don't buy it. Adult Link barely has any other weaponry than the Master Sword and Hylian Shield, plus bombs when he exits the Sacred Realm and faces Sheik. And Light is well tied to the Light Arrows. If anything, this was supposed to be a final challenge in order to build a rainbow bridge to Ganondorf's castle. The setup was perfect, receiving the light arrows from Princess Zelda, the weapon to conquer the place that tests all skills, a temple that could have been the best in the game, or a letdown seeing how the Temple of Time / Light Temple of Twilight Princess turned out. Though, let's keep in mind that one was not the last temple prior to Hyrule Castle, far from it.
Ocarina's Temple of Light, on the other hand, really could have been a Temple of Time final pre-climb to Ganon's dungeon. With it, the Forest Temple would have competition as the best dungeon in the game. Just look at the Stone Tower Temple in Majora's Mask, where the best moment is by far the part upon defeating the first mini-boss. The Light Arrows, the potential that could have been, since what do? Enlighten and turn everything upside down, with aerial sections, water sections, ground sections, and more. Combining everything from bombs, the Longshot, Megaton Hammer, Lens of Truth, Mirror Shield, and naturally, the Light Arrows. These late dungeons really like to throw in the absolute best, and to fill in the shoes after the Spirit Temple requires a lot. Even if it was the first temple in the adult section, it isn't any easier, as the Forest Temple was such a perfect first temple. Remember, the child section had interiors, not temples. Alright, so let's say this was the final regular dungeon before Ganon's castle. Would we get the Triforce here? No, as you can't ruin the perfection that is its split. But what we could have had instead is something extra, and that being something that is the greatest potential of a final 4K remake of this game. Closing the circle of adult temples and medallions. Instead of getting the Light Medallion first, as we in this situation meet Rauru twice. First after waking up as an adult, and the second after proving to him that we can handle the challenge of Ganondorf at the top of Castle Hill.
A more organic experience of actually showing your worth, first as a child in an adult's body, before facing up against the wielder of the Triforce of Power. That is exactly what this could have been, and could still be in a future remake. A groundbreaking moment after a groundbreaking dungeon that will make a Switch 2 remake worth it, even at a higher asking price. Possibly the best Zelda dungeon of all time. And this should be the expectation, as we got just that in a $20 paid expansion and final DLC to Breath of the Wild. The Champion's Ballad, where the final reward was the final trial underneath the Shrine of Resurrection.
A temple of technological and magical wonder, just like what we saw with the final trial and the so far only paid Legend of Zelda DLC, though this time with locked doors, keys to these, mini-bosses that can rival Dark Link, all leading to a boss that can overcome the Spirit Temple's Twin Rova, while also not overshadowing the final battle against Ganondorf/Ganon, keeping it all perfectly balanced, as that is what defines Ocarina since 1998. The gradual build-up throughout the game led to the ultimate showdown against Gerudo Ganondorf before he became the Demon King Ganon. Truly a holdover moment of this remake is being prepared for reveal and release. Not only that, but with the first new traditional 3D dungeon since 2011. It could also be a hint that Zelda dungeons will return to their original peak form, since if there was one thing that the Zelda team shouldn't have messed with in the open air era, then it is the highlights of the 3D Zelda in its first near 20 years. Dungeons, not divine beasts or temples, that really are just divine beasts with themes, but otherwise the same progression structure. That is the true potential of an Ocarina of Time 4K remake on the Nintendo Switch 2, showing that we can have new Zelda games in the future with new temples that can rival the ones that are 15 plus years old after the 40th anniversary of our beloved franchise. An assurance from Nintendo saying, "Trust us, we are doing our utmost to surpass the quality of the Zelda dungeons and temples that you know and love."
But what do you think about the Light Temple inside the Temple of Time that was built by Rauru to hide the Triforce around the founding era of the Kingdom of Hyrule? And more so, will it come back on the Nintendo Switch 2 in Ocarina of Time Remake? Sound off in the comment section down below. If you haven't already, then be sure to leave a like, subscribe and press the notification bell. Last but not least, a big thanks to you for watching and to all our patreon.com/commonrealm patrons. Special shoutouts go to our heroes, Cheryl, Garrett Hoy, Holly Wolf and Kintaro. You rock, and please enjoy these two awesome videos.